Okay, so let's talk about one of the most famous stories out there, the fallen angels. You know the one. Satan rebels, a big war in heaven, and he takes a third of the angels with him. It's an incredible image. But is that story actually in the Bible? We're going to follow the evidence, and you might be surprised where it leads.
So this is the big question, right? The idea that a third of the angels fell with Satan, I mean, it's everywhere. You hear it in sermons, you see it in movies, but where does it actually come from? Let's put on our detective hats and really follow the breadcrumbs in the text, starting with a story that we all think we know.
This is the one, the story we all know. It's set in this primeval time, before humanity was even on the scene. Satan, maybe the highest angel, gets proud, rebels against God, and convinces a full third of the angelic host to join him. It's an epic, foundational story, but when you actually go looking for it chapter and verse, something really surprising happens.
And this is where our investigation really kicks into high gear. According to biblical scholar Dr. Michael Heiser, this popular story that we're all so familiar with, well, it's not actually in the Bible. He makes this pretty bold claim that it's a tradition that's sort of been cut off from its actual textual roots. So let's not take his word for it. Let's go look for ourselves.
Okay, let's get granular here. If this event is as big and important as we all think, there should be some pretty clear biblical passages describing it, right? So, how many verses explicitly say that Satan led a rebellion before the Garden of Eden and took a third of the angels with him? Think about it.
The answer is 0. Yep, 0. There is not one single passage in the entire Bible that explicitly lays out that story, Satan's fall with a third of the angels before Eden. Not one. So, if it's not there, where in the world did this incredibly popular idea come from? To solve this mystery, we have to go to the only place in the entire Bible that even connects the key ideas, a third and heavenly stars, which are often interpreted as angels. And that journey takes us all the way to the very end of the Bible, to the book of Revelation, chapter 12.
This is it. This is ground zero. If that one-third number has any scriptural footing at all, it has to come from here. Any argument for that traditional story has to wrestle with this passage. But as you know, context is everything. So let's see what's actually going on in Revelation 12.
And right away, we hit a massive clue that starts to unravel the whole traditional story. It's all about the timing. The text couldn't be clearer. The war in heaven breaks out after the male child, the Messiah, is born and ascends to God's throne. This isn't a story about some pre-creation fall. It's an event that is directly triggered by the life and victory of Jesus.
Just look at this when you put it side by side. The timeline problem becomes crystal clear. The traditional story, the one we all know, puts the angelic rebellion way back before Eden. But the actual text, the timeline in Revelation 12, puts that war in heaven thousands of years after Eden, happening only after the Messiah's ascension. The two timelines are just fundamentally incompatible. Okay, so if Revelation 12 isn't about a pre-Eden rebellion, does that mean the Bible doesn't talk about any other angelic falls? Not at all. For our next clue, we need to turn to a different witness, the Apostle Peter. He holds a critical piece of the puzzle. Now, listen to this carefully. Peter brings up a specific time when angels sinned, but then he gives us this massive clue about when this happened. Right after mentioning the sinning angels, he immediately connects it to the next thing on his list, God saving Noah from the great flood. He's literally pinning this angelic sin to a very specific moment in history. I mean, look at the sequence Peter lays out for us. It's a clear historical progression. First, the sin of the angels. Second, the flood of Noah. And third, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Peter is absolutely deliberately placing this angelic rebellion in the time frame right before the great flood. So that leads us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? Is there a story in the Old Testament about a group of angels sinning, an event that happened right before Noah and the flood? If we take Peter's timeline seriously, there is only one story that fits the bill. And that one story takes us all the way back to the beginning, to the book of Genesis. It seems Peter isn't pointing us to some primordial war in heaven led by Satan, but to a very different, very specific, and frankly much weirder angelic crime that's described early on in the human story. And here it is, Genesis chapter 6. It talks about the sons of God, which is a term the Old Testament uses for divine beings, for angels, who committed a great sin right before the great flood. The timing fits Peter's clue like a glove. The text is suggesting that this is the real fallen angel event that Peter and other biblical writers had in mind.
So let's just lay it all out side by side to make it super clear. The popular story we all know, its source is really tradition, supported by taking Revelation 12 completely out of its context. The account we find by following the clues in the text, that's rooted in Genesis 6 and backed up by Peter. The timing is totally different. One is primeval, before Eden. The other is pre-flood, after Eden. And even the main characters are different. Satan and his angels in one versus this specific group called the sons of God in the other.
So when we actually get granular and dig into the text, the story we find is pretty different from the one we all thought we knew. And that left us with a really fascinating final thought. If a story this common isn't actually in the Bible, what other widely held beliefs might be based more on tradition than on the text itself? It's definitely a question worth asking.